So if you've got yourself a Mac and a Windows PC, exchanging the data between those two systems can sometimes be a little bit difficult because they're two different operating systems, right? Now, there are several ways for you to be able to exchange data between these two systems. Now, I'm going to show you the best method that is always going to work, but it is going to require you to get a little bit technical and do some changes on the networking front to be able to copy data between these two systems. It's the best way. It's the way that companies, businesses that have users, staff that are using both Windows and Mac, this is the way that they get the data flowing between these two systems. But before we do go into that, a few other ways that you can do this. One of the most simplest ways is to grab yourself a USB stick, plug it into one of the computers, copy some data onto that, and then move it to the other computer and copy the data off that. And that's generally going to work. What you may just find there is that Windows and the Mac use different file formats. Like the actual format of the drives themselves are different. So the Mac has their formats, macOS extended, and they've also got this one called APFS, and they unfortunately don't work on Windows, who use FAT32 and NTFS. A lot of the USB copying is going to really depend on how the drive has been formatted. Simple way could be using just an email system where you're just going to add attachments of different sorts of files, and then you send them to a person on the other end that has a Mac or a Windows computer. You could use a system such as Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, have them synced up that way, and doing it that way, it will also work quite well. Now, the way that we're going to be showing you how to do this is by going and tinkering with some of the network settings. Essentially, you want to have both computers on the same network, a Windows and a Mac computer connected to the same Wi-Fi network or connected with one of those blue network cables. And then what we're going to do is we're going to log into each of those two. We're going to configure the IP addresses of those. We're going to configure and do some of the tinkering around the sharing settings on each of those, because you're going to have to go and open up some of the sharing protocols to be enabling the data transfer between those two systems. And then we're going to show you how to get them up and running and talking to each other so you can easily transfer data between the two of them. Before we do get into that, remember that this is a tech YouTube channel. Please do subscribe. I love it if you subscribe so that you can be notified of when we release next video on all things tech. We're going to go and open up our system settings section. You can go into the Apple logo on the top left corner and go to system settings, and you'll be shown this right here. Then you've got an area here around general. The section that we're looking at is this section here called sharing. So in here, you can do a lot of things. One section that we're going to be focusing on here is around the file sharing. And the file sharing is where you are granting permissions for a file to be accessible on the network so that other computers or devices even over a network. Really, really cool feature. So what we're going to firstly do is turn this on. So file sharing over here, we're going to just click on that right there. And now file sharing is on. Essentially all we've done is we've just enabled the service. Okay, we haven't done anything other than that. We've just enabled the service to let the computer know we are fine to do file sharing on this computer. And that's the same with all of these other things. And I would recommend and encourage you to go and play with some of these other things, have a look around what they actually do. And if you want, if you see some of those features as being interesting to use, go ahead and use them. Now, to go and configure each of these, you click on this little eye on the right of it, which sort of gives you a little bit more information about that. Now, one thing is down the very bottom, you'll notice that it says local host name, and this is the name of your computer. Mine is called Emilio's-MacBook-Pro .local. So if there's computers out on my network, let's say I'm doing this in a workplace and there's computers that are trying to see my computer, or an IT administrator trying to understand, well, what is the name of your computer? And this directly relates to your IP address behind the scenes. File sharing is now turned on. I'm going to click on this little eye over here. It says that other users can access shared folders on this computer and administrators, all volumes, at this is my IP address. If I go back into my Wi-Fi section, this is where I've set up my IP address. I can click on details, and this is my IP address right here, 172.16.1.115, and we can go and change it if you want to, but that is your IP address. You're going to need to know your IP address to be able to really connect to your Mac. Okay, so if we cancel out of that, go back into general, back into sharing, and then the I next to file sharing. SMB stands for the protocol. SMB is the protocol that it's going to use to connect to my file sharing. Now we're going to show you how to connect to that in a little while, or how to connect to any other computer on your network, okay? Because every other Mac, every other Windows computer even, that has file sharing turned on, you can access those computers and access the data on those computers at SMB : / and then the IP address. Allow full disk access for all users. Now this is where you want to be a little bit careful. Do you want anybody who's anybody to be able to access all of the files on your computer simply by them accessing that IP? So for example, you're in a workplace, you've got your Mac, you've brought your Mac in, or this is your work computer, and you know your IP address now, great. If you have that enabled and that turned on, anybody that's on your network, even if it's at home, any other computer that's on your network could navigate to this, as long as they know your IP address, and be able to access all of the data on your Mac. So you may want to look at controlling that and whether you actually want to turn that on or off. It's completely up to you. But then you can get very, very specific around what are the shared folders that we want to be able to access or share out on my network. By default, it's gone and said my documents folder, my music folder, and my Emilio Aguero's public folder are the 3 folders that are accessible on my network, and these are the people who can access them. So when I say these are the people, these are the user types that can access them. So as long as it's Emilio Aguero, and I know my credentials to log in as Emilio Aguero. I mean, when you log into your Mac, you may be asked to put in your username and your password. Your username could be, in my case, it's just Emilio Aguero, and the password is the password that I use to log into my Mac. So when I connect to my Mac from another computer, it's going to ask me, how do I log in? What are the credentials? What are the login credentials that I should use? And that's where you would put in the username and the password of your Mac, of my Mac, of Emilio Aguero's Mac. That's what I'm going to be doing when I'm going to be accessing that address right there, 172.16.1.15. Now, I could go and create additional administrators, additional users, contacts. You can get a lot more fancy in here. If you are in a business, then you've got this whole other thing behind the scenes called Active Directory. Again, a whole other course that we can talk about that, and that is generally going to be aimed more at IT administrators, but you can essentially manage permissions and users and passwords in a central spot across all of your computers. But we're not going to do this, and we don't have this on our Mac right now. But I can go and create new users in here. Okay, go and create users the same way that we could before by going into the user section inside system settings. You can create additional users, add a password in there, and then I can add those in here. Or I can go into the contact section and select contacts in there, and then they're the accounts that I can use to log in to that music share, and here are the users that have got access to it. So you're going to want to go and look at each one of these and then add the permissions as needed. Now, if you want to share another folder, you simply click on the plus over here. It's going to now ask me, well, what other folder do I want to share? Well, maybe I want to share pictures. Open. Now, pictures is listed in here, and these are the users that can access it. Remember that we talked about everyone, and this is another group. Do we want everyone to be able to get access to this? Well, no. We only want Emilio Aguero to have read and write access only. Okay, that's what that means. Otherwise, I can go into here and say, yes, I do want read and write access to everybody. As long as I can access that, everybody can access my pictures. Some further options over here. Do you want to enable share files and folders using SMB? SMB being that protocol. And then here is Windows file sharing. I need that to be on. Done and done. Now what I've done here is I've connected to a computer that I've got. This is running Windows 11. Now on the Windows computer, you need to have enabled sharing. The easiest place to do this is in the search. You can just search for it. I'm going to type in sharing, and I'm going to look for manage advanced sharing setting. And within here, I'm going to make sure that network discovery is on. Now you'll notice that there are 3 sections here. There's domain networks, public networks, and private networks. This really depends on the setup of your Windows computer. Is your Windows computer part of a domain? Is it part of a public network, maybe in a public space, or is it in a private network? You want to make sure that your PC can find and be found by other devices on your network. If this is not enabled on the Windows computer, then another Mac, another Windows computer will not be able to access the data on this computer. And you want to make sure that file and print sharing is turned on. You want to allow others on the network to access shared files and printers on the device. Each of these three profiles has the same option available to you. If it's a private network, you maybe want to turn those on. If it's a public network, if it's a domain network, the same deal. Okay, so you go and try those three accordingly based on your setup. Now, once you've done that, inside my File Explorer, I'm going to select on Network. And if everything has worked, hopefully, you should now be able to see other computers out on your network over here. The same way as on your Mac computer, we now need to know the IP address of the Windows computer, especially if you want to do transfer of data between Windows and between the Mac. And there's a few ways to do this on the Windows computer. You could just right click on here, go into my network internet settings. Now, whether you're on Wi-Fi or Ethernet on that Windows computer, you go and check out the IP address settings of either of those two. I do have Wi-Fi turned on, but it's actually connected over Ethernet. So this Windows computer that I'm connected to is plugged in with a physical cable. So I'm going to go into the Ethernet section and I can see exactly right there my IP address being 172.16.32. If I want to go and change it, I can click on edit over here, and then I can assign a specific IP address for this computer as need be. It's probably important to make sure that there is a connection established between the two computers, that they are pingable between each other. So what you could do is you could go into, on a Windows computer, open up a command prompt. You can do that by going into Start and typing in CMD. And I could just do ping. What's my IP address on my Mac side? I've already forgotten. 115. So I can say ping and then put the IP address in. 16.1.115. And look at that. It's receiving a reply. That means that it does see it on the network and it can connect to it. On the Mac side of things, let's just move this out of the way. Remember my IP address is there's this thing called the terminal. Okay, you can access this by going into the Finder, going down into Applications, into Utility, and there's the terminal. You can also search for it on the Spotlight. And in here, I could also do the same thing. I could do ping, and now I want to ping my Windows box or any other box, just to make sure that there's a connection between the two. And there you go. That is receiving a response. I can go back into Windows Explorer. I'm going to go into this PC, C drive over here, and I've got some folders in here, including shared files, and I've got some folders in there as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and share this particular shared files. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go and say Properties. Under here, I've got sharing. So what I need to do is I want to be able to have a Mac computer to be able to access those files. And then the same way that we did on the Mac side, we wanted to share that folder. We want that to be visible on the Mac side. So in here, I'm going to go and say share. And you'll notice that by default, it says that it's not shared. So at the moment, I can't do anything with it. Click on share. Who do I want to be able to get access to this? Well, Emilio. That's the username on my Windows computer. Share. So by default, the folder is now shared, done. And this is how I would access it. // cctv-blink, so that's the name of my of this particular Windows computer, /shared files. Shared files, of course, being the name of the folder that we've got right there, and click on done. Now, before I click on done, we now know the IP address. If you remember the IP address, there's another way to do this, which is sometimes a little bit nicer, is to go into a command line. I just like this to be a little bit easier sometimes. Do an IP config, and I can see that my IP address is there, 172.16.1.32. Now, instead of this host name, this is the name of the computer, it could also be the IP address of 172.16.1.32/shared files. So that folder is now shared. That folder should now be accessible on the network. They'll then be asked to put in their credentials, their login credentials. And in this case, you saw that it was Emilio was the username. So as long as I know Emilio is my username and my password is the password that is for my Windows computer, I should be able to establish a connection between the two. Let's firstly now connect to my Mac computer. We now remember my Mac's computer's IP address. That was it right there. SMB://172.16.1.15. On the Mac side of things, you need to do a //. On a Windows side, you got to do a //. This is the path which a Mac would use to connect to another Mac. So if I'm on a Mac and I need to connect to this particular file share, I would do a // 172.16.1.115. If I'm on the Windows side, I need to do a / 172.16.1.115. Back on my Windows computer, I now can do this in a couple of spots. I can go straight into the search area and start typing in //. Or I can do it from within my Windows File Explorer. / 172.16.1.115. That's all I need to do. Or I could put in the host name. Again, we're talking about DNS a little bit. DNS IP addresses, they sort of should talk, but the IP is always going to be the easiest and the most safest way to do it, unless you have a bit of an expertise around DNS and that DNS is all set up correctly. I should now be able to press enter. And if all things work, bam, I'm now connected to my Mac's file shares. I can now open up music and there it is. And let's just make sure it looks correct. If I go into my Finder, go into music, you're gonna hear I'm on my Mac, right? There it is. So I can now go in, copy paste. I can add new things. Look at this. I can go into here and I can say new folder. This was made on Windows. Here I am. There's the folder now on my Mac. It didn't ask me for credentials. I'm not sure if you noticed that. Normally, when you're trying to connect to another computer, it's going to ask you for the username and the password of that computer to make sure that you are authenticated, that you have the right permission, that you're not some intruder trying to get access to that other computer. And the reason that it hasn't asked me is because my Mac's username and password and my Windows username and password is the same. And that is why it didn't actually ask me and why it connected straight away. It probably will ask you if you're especially connecting to a device that is using different usernames and passwords. If you want to have quick and easy access to this, you can set it up as a mapped drive. I can right click on my PC, this PC, I can say mapped network drive. Okay, maybe I want to make it directly into music. And I can now pick what letter. So maybe M for music. And then you want to say reconnect at sign in. And you can also log in with different credentials. So I can now select finish. Under my this PC, I've now got an M drive. Now let's do it the reverse. We're now going to do a Mac computer connecting to a Windows computer. We now know my IP address is 172.16.1.32. Remember that we went in and we actually shared this one on the network. There it is. And that is my path. Okay. Or I can connect via my IP address, which was 172.16.1.32. If everything has been successful, what hopefully should happen is you should be able to open up your Finder, and under your section down here under location, sometimes it should just show up. Your Windows computer, your network drives should just show up. Sometimes going into network, you may actually see it listed in here. Sometimes it won't work. There's a lot of reasons because of that. We can spend a lot of time on another video. It's called CCTV-B-Link. There it is. It's automatically shown up in my location without me having to do anything. And it's connected as Emilio. Now, again, it's connected as Emilio because that's who I am. I'm logged in as the same credentials on my Mac as on my Windows. I can disconnect out of there. I'll try to connect automatically, but I can select connect as. And it's going to ask me, well, what credentials? This is what may actually be showing up on your computer. Asking you to put in the credentials of the Windows computer, not of the Mac, of the Windows computer. You'll notice two things. One, it's connected to my users because that was shared already, but there's my shared files. And there is the file contents. So if I'm on my Windows computer again, still connected right here, there they are. And much like what we did before, is on my Mac side, I could go right click, new folder. Hey, this is the Mac. There it is. What I could do, I could just go, hey, look, this is a file right here. This is a MikroTik console for a router. I could copy it. I could just paste it right in here. Paste. I'm now on my Mac. There's the file. The other way would be to go and select go and then go to connect to server. SMB://172.16.1. I'm going to type in 32. Connect. There we go. It's established a connection. Select the volume you want to mount. Shared files. Okay. To open up my Finder. There it is. There is the contents of my shared files that we just saw before. Folder number 2. Back on the Windows side. C drive. shared files. There it is, folder number 2. If you want, you could try go and connect over the name, CCTV, blink, and then / again, shared files, connect. And it's established a connection because obviously there is resolution there because of the DNS. And then I could click on this little plus. It's now added it right into there. And it's now a shortcut that is available directly through my connector server section right there. Done, done, done. We've got this thing up and running. Now you go and try this yourself. Go and do it. Let us know down below in the comments if it worked, yay, or a nay if it didn't. Remember, as I said, there are other ways to do this as well. USB sticks over emails using something like Dropbox will also work just well enough, but doing the file sharing over the network is the best way. But hey, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will catch you on the next tech video. See you then.